Okay, so we have begun. So I'm going to hang up on this line, okay? Okay, hold on. Hi, everyone. We're going to be starting in about 10 minutes. This is Dan Timins calling, just so you know. So we'll be right with you. Did you hear that? Okay, now are we on? Am I on yet? Slideshow up? All right. Okay, so why don't I just bring up the view slideshow and you just tell me when to engage from beginning. Okay, and last thing is we have to switch it out if I recall. That's right. Swap. Great. All right. Okay, okay. Thank you. Great. So I should be up and running. Let me just bring up the screen. Let me just introduce myself really quickly to those of you. My name is Daniel Timins. I'm a trust and estates and elder law attorney. And simply stated, that this is a program that we are going to be covering Medicaid and what comes with Medicaid. So I am going to start the slideshow. And Shayna, if you could just confirm that you are looking at it at this point. Let us start from the beginning and swap. So are you seeing what I'm seeing? Okay, wonderful. Thank you, everybody. So let's begin. Today we're going to be talking about managing Medicaid, and specifically we are going to be talking about how to preserve family assets and save money, as well as taking care of people's care needs. Here's the disclaimer. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. But if you can't see it and you want to see it, you may. So again, what are we talking about today? We're specifically talking about what Medicaid is. It's a government program. So this is about getting government paid care for aging or disabled family members, preserving family money, and making sure that we're staying compliant and out of trouble with these two things. So for a lot of people on this phone call, you may be considering Medicaid planning for yourselves, but you're probably really doing it for your parents. You know, if you have some type of degenerative illness or already have what is classified as being a disability, then you should be doing Medicaid planning immediately. But for many of us, it's going to be for our parents probably in their early mid-80s, certainly thereafter. It's a possibility. But then we ask, but why Medicaid? Well, here's the reason why. Like I said, it's money. We're taking care of people here. You know, if you have someone who has 24 hours of home care, meaning someone who's in the home with them, helping them with personal care, in New York, that's about $200,000 a year. Now, when I say New York, I don't just mean like, you know, Manhattan on the Upper West Side. You know, I'm talking about far out into Rockland and, you know, even potentially Putnam County, get up to Dutchess. You know, maybe if you go out to the Finger Lakes region, it's going to be a little less, but not by a heck of a lot. So if you're going to a nursing home, and not you necessarily, I'll just say you so that you can internalize it a little bit better, can cost even more. Or imagine if a parent has to go. The family money is just going to disappear really quickly. So why Medicaid? Because people say, you know, I've worked hard throughout my life. Why should I take my hard-earned money and spend it on something that the government can pay for anyway? They can pay for people to come to your house. They can pay for you to go to a nursing home to rehabilitate. Now, if you have children, you probably consider getting on Medicaid because, you know, from what I've learned, you know, parents, at least some parents, will sacrifice anything for their kids. Certainly mothers do. Dads, not so sure. Here and there, some of them do. But the important thing is if you do not have any children, so if you are an aunt or an uncle, or if you have an aunt or an uncle and you think, well, let's get Aunt May onto Medicaid, may not work. It's going to be a little bit suspicious to any authorities if it's ever challenged. But most importantly, you know, aunts and uncles tend to use the money for themselves. So if you want to leave your money to someone other than a child and you don't have children, that's fine. But remember, most people don't. You don't have to be most people. So what is Medicaid? Exactly. Medicaid is a health and personal care program that assists low-income and asset families or individuals, in paying for long-term medical and custodial care It's a joint program funded by the federal government and run at the state and county level, where coverage, exemptions, and costs may vary. So that's a mouthful. So how do we explain that? Well, let's break it into its specific components. First, the type of care. When we're talking about Medicaid, these are the activities of daily living that we're covering. So for example, transferring, and by the way, that isn't just walking all over. That's specifically transferring from a bed to a bathroom, etc. But if you have troubles doing that, or your parent or your aunt, Medicaid can help with that. Bathing, dressing, if you have trouble eating, or continence and toileting. So basically, these are activities of daily living. They're the things that when we're happy and healthy, everything is cool. But when we're having issues with them, we realize how much we need to do these things on a daily basis. So these are the types of things that Medicaid primarily covers and was originally designed to cover. People who are older or disabled who have issues regarding their personal care needs. Now, it's important to remember that Medicaid is not Medicare. Medicare is solely a health program, and you have to work for it. It is an entitlement program, meaning that you are entitled to it once you work for 40 quarters and pay in to Medicare. Medicare, by the way, is one of the two things that were withheld from your paycheck. When you see Social Security and Medicare, then there's Medicare. It's called OASDI. Now, if you're disabled, you can receive Medicaid within 2 years after that disability. If you are under 65, then you have to wait another 5 months. I know, it's crazy. 2 years, 5 months, who makes this stuff? I couldn't even make this stuff up. And again, Medicare has different parts. I mean, I could talk about each of these. I'll speak quickly about Part A and Part B. Part A, you have to pay for, and that's what you are paying for right now out of your paycheck. That is for inpatient hospital care in the future. So if you're 70 years old, you're crossing the street, you hurt yourself, you fall, and you break your hip, and you have to go to a hospital, Part A is going to pay. Now, you're paying for much of Part A right now. That's what you're paying for out of your pocket when you get your salary deducted from your salary deduction. Now, you can pay up to $407 per month if you haven't been paying as you've been going forward during your working years. The important part to remember is that Part A is like actual health insurance. In the future, I don't have to pay for the actual surgery, but I do have copays and deductibles. Now, Part B, when you finally retire, because I know some people on this call have not retired yet, that is supplemental medical insurance. That's paying for actual doctor visits, etc. You do pay that when you retire. You're not paying it now, but when you start getting Social Security, they're going to automatically deduct Part B from your Social Security. And the amount varies based on how much income you made the prior year or the prior 2 years. So right now, I think it's even gone up. This slide, I think, shows from last year. I think now it's even a little higher. We'll avoid talking about Part C and Part D because they're not quite as relevant to the program today. Now, Medicare Part A only covers the following personal care costs. Skilled nursing facilities, and this is, regarding personal care needs, you will only be able to receive 100 days in a rehabilitative nursing facility. So if you have a parent, like I said, falls down, breaks their hip, they're going to go into a hospital and then they're going to be sent out of the hospital, hopefully within a few days, but they're not going to go straight home necessarily. They may end up in a nursing home, which is also known as Nursing Home and Rehabilitation Center, because they're going to rehab that hip. Now, Medicare is required to pay for this first 20 days. For days 21 to 100, they may pay. If your condition improves, they will continue to pay. But if you are in a condition that is not improving, they're going to stop paying for that nursing home. I've had people on day 30 find out Medicare is going to stop paying for them. And that really wrecks them because they figured that they were going to be able to get a full 100 days or longer. You don't get longer. The nursing home rehab facility will never get paid by Medicare more than 100 days in a row. Now, you do get some home health care visits, but they're pretty hard to get. It has to be after a hospital or skilled nursing facility stay, and you must be confined at your home. So home health care expenses, again, and nursing facilities are not really going to be covered substantially under Medicare Part A. Now you have to remember, so what is and what is not Medicaid? I bring up Medicare first because Medicaid is that program that pays for your activities of daily living, but it's the payer of last resort. So remember how I told you out of your Social Security, when you're 65 and a half or 70, whatever your retirement age is, I shouldn't say 70 because the oldest for Social Security is 67. You'll qualify for Medicare by then. But the important part is this. You'll start paying your Part B out of your Social Security. You still have to pay that even if you're on Medicaid. If you have private insurance that you have from some point in your life, that will have to pay first as well. Medicaid is kind of like the cleanup. They're there because they are saying, all right, well, you've paid already out of your pocket what we expect you to do. Everything else has been paid. We are the payer of last resort. And it's important to remember that Medicaid is not an entitlement program like Medicare. Medicaid is a needs-based program. You don't just qualify for it. You have to be tested from asset and income limitations as well as healthcare limitations. The term need-based really means I have the financial need. You also need to have the physical need, but that's not typically what the term is. Okay, now this is who Medicaid is appropriate for. It is specifically for children who are already disabled, who have perhaps a severe case of autism, cerebral or on the spectrum. I forget what is politically correct now with illnesses as well. Cerebral palsy or other chronic illnesses that are going to affect them for the rest of their lives. Aging parents who may have Alzheimer's or Parkinson's. I know Alzheimer's is a form of dementia, but not everyone who has dementia has Alzheimer's. So if they have advanced stages of dementia, or at least they're starting, you may want to make sure that you get them onto benefits sooner. Now, adults, they don't have to be aging, and I say parents, I really should have said the elderly, but aging, I guess, is more politically correct as well. Any adult who has multiple sclerosis or lupus, basically people who have degenerative diseases. Anyone hurt in a medical malpractice or personal injury case, so crossing the street, get hit by a car, and now it changes me for life. I'm now disabled. That's a good person to begin Medicaid planning for. And basically, any elderly individual who can no longer perform any of those activities of daily living. Like if you're having trouble bathing yourself, or your parent is, you should make sure that you at least begin looking into Medicaid for them. Now, Medicaid may also be appropriate for someone who becomes disabled, but then the illness then gets better, or it doesn't end up being severe. It messes up your tax planning, but again, that's the type of thing you're going to need to work with a professional with. If you think you're going to get sick and then you don't, and then you plan as though you're going to get sick, you may have tax consequences. So that's something, again, to figure out with a professional. So who are the players in this Medicaid sphere? First of all, there's the government. Surprise, surprise, it's a government-paid program. It's Department of Social Services. That is basically the people who administer both to Medicare and to Medicaid. In New York, we have the Human Resource Administration. And then to some extent, Social Security Administration is involved for people who are under 65 and disabled, because they're on Social Security disability. But, if you have a parent who's 88 years old, Social Security Administration, the biggest thing that they're going to be involved in is just continuing to pay for Medicare Part B and paying that income to your parents who may have to put some of the money somewhere to protect it for Medicaid purposes. Then there are the individual professionals, people like me, estate and elder law attorneys, social workers. These used to be called geriatric care managers. And when you hear a loaded title like that, what is that? Geriatric, elder, so they're dealing with elderly people. Care, they're taking care of their care, and they happen to be managers. They're managing elderly people's care. There you go. And then actual caregivers, they have agencies and private caregivers. So for example, if I work with an agency or I work with an individual, for Medicaid to pay, they must be certified. Can't just say, well, I'm going to have my daughter do this for me and have her paid by Medicaid. It doesn't work like that. There are nursing homes and rehabilitative centers. Excuse me. The important thing to remember with Medicaid is it does not include assisted living facilities. That's going to be on the test. Assisted living is not covered by Medicaid. All right? That's covered by private pay, things like long-term care policies. There is a slight exception in New York, but there's an exception that you'll win the lottery as well. I would not bank on the fact that you have a parent, or yourself for that matter, if you're disabled, end up in assisted living as opposed to a nursing home if you get elderly and you can't live home anymore and Medicaid pays for it. Just don't plan on that. So here are the types of Medicaid. There's home care, which in the legal community we call community care. And that sounds, pretty harmless, not a big deal, all right? That handles personal care, physical therapy, home health care. It also covers things like clinical or outpatient basis. So if you have like adult daycare, that's in the community. You don't need to be in a facility, including physicians, dentists, and pharmaceuticals. For dentists, it's only for essential care, by the way. And then the other type is in the nursing home, and leave it up to an attorney to think of something worse than the title nursing home. We call it institutional care, so you want to get scared. Boof, you're getting institutional care. Don't ask me why attorneys are so heartless. What can I say? Don't hate the player, hate the game. This includes hospitals, medical facilities, and the big one everyone thinks of because it's in the title, nursing homes. So that's important to remember, that there are two types of care, and Medicaid will cover conceivably both. Now, what does home care cover? This is what everybody wants, by the way. It covers a paid caregiver who is, again, qualified and certified to help your disabled or elderly family member or friend with their activities of daily living: walking, transferring, toileting, bathing, feeding themselves, etc. Now, the thing with home care is you're not guaranteed under the program how many hours you're going to get. We still occasionally at my end get people onto 24-hour home care, but like I said, there's an exception to you potentially winning the lottery. 24-hour care has become something where the odds are pretty close to being a lottery winner. It's hard to assume that a parent is just going to qualify for 24 hours of Medicaid paid caregiving. And the other thing is home care doesn't cover cleaning or fancy cooking. So if I have a caregiver taking care of my mother, she may help her with feeding, but she's not going to have to cook, some amazing 4-course meal for her. She doesn't have to clean out the toilet. This is for personal care. It's help with assisted activities of daily living. Now, everyone prefers care at home to a nursing home. But like I said, it's hard to get 24 hours care. And if you need a nurse at any point during the next 24-hour period, you're going to more or less be required to be at a nursing home instead. You're going to get institutional instead of home care. And people tend not to really like that. And the question, again, that I brought up before is, can my family member get paid by Department of Social Services to act as my caregiver at home? And the answer is no, they cannot. Family members are exempted in most circumstances, I should add, not all, but most, from being paid for home care. Now, if you have a long-term care policy, typically you can get that family member paid. It is possible to have family caregivers, but it's very, very rare. So, can I just pay that nice woman down the street in cash every week to take care of my parents? Well, that's nice because you're helping, keep people employed. So the answer is yes. But it's kind of like when you speed, if you get caught, you could get in trouble. Here's why, and this is what always happens. You're risking labor law infractions and tax evasion because you're not withholding taxes. And you're not paying for things like unemployment or disability for that employee. So you have a big problem right there. They're an employee. I got news for you. If you're keeping someone more than 30 hours, they have more or less consistent hours every week. You have an employee. So you're now both participating in a labor law infraction and tax evasion. So good job. You got two different agencies upset. You're probably going to have to pay them cash because they don't want to pay income taxes. The problem is when you pay cash, you can't deduct those healthcare expenses on income tax returns. And if I have an aging parent or a family member who needs different types of personal care, well, here's the problem. I'm probably paying a decent amount of money for that. And they may not be making a huge amount of income because, let's face it, they're elderly or disabled. They may have a pension, they may have Social Security, but the cost for the actual care is going to be expensive. I can't deduct that. The government allows us to deduct healthcare expenses beyond 7.5% of adjusted gross income. Well, now I got rid of that. So if my mom is spending half of her income every year on her care, she can't deduct any of that when I'm paying someone else in cash. And if the caregiver hurts themselves, because again, a lot of these caregivers tend to be people who are in vulnerable positions themselves, they're going to be told by one of my colleagues of the bar, another attorney, hey, guess what? You're entitled to sue this family. And guess what? They have this big house that you can sue them for. And I have seen plenty of people you just assume that were that nice woman or man, but it's really been a nice woman, who, again, hurt themselves, and then they turn out to be not so nice because they have families of their own. And so they're going to conceivably sue your family because, guess what? You didn't have a disability policy for them through the state. So you can't pay that nice woman down the street, but you may not want to. Then you get these poor individuals stuck in the nursing home, and they say, but I don't want to go to the nursing home. I do not blame you. No one wants to be in a nursing home. Let's be honest. People want to go to a nursing home as much as they want to go to a Jets game. No one wants to go to a nursing home. I say that because I had Jets season tickets. It doesn't matter. I confess to these terrible things. But no one wants to be in a nursing home while they're on Medicaid. Not you, not your family, not even the nursing home, because the nursing home gets paid a heck of a lot more if you're paying out of pocket. The government says we're providing you, nursing home, with a whole bunch of people. We're providing wholesale. So we want a discount. And so the nursing home gets paid what the government tells them they're going to get paid. So they don't like it as much. The problem is you probably need to be in the nursing home, or your parent or friend or family member does. Whoops, let me go back. I didn't mean to go that quickly. So then you say, all right, well, the person says, I feel better now. I swear. How do I get out of here? Well, the nursing facility is going to want to see. First, they're going to say, these are the suggested amount of hours and types of care we need, and you need to prove that you have it before you're released. And the problem is then that you actually got to find a caregiver to come home, and wait there for your parent or your family member to be taken care of. Now, anyone who has mental competency can release themselves voluntarily, but when you have someone who's sick, they tend not to think about that. And you're able to kind of keep them in the nursing home longer. Sometimes you want them there, and they don't want to be. They just don't know how to voluntarily release themselves. They can't force you out a nursing home once you are admitted. They're just waiting. When they have a troubled person, they say, well, you should really go home. Oh, good, you have care. We'll help you find home health caregivers or whatever. Or you probably want to release yourself. So if you have a family member who's causing troubles for the nursing home staff, and they say, we would love to see you go back home and take care of yourself, et cetera, be cautious. They're trying to get them out. So remember, once you're admitted to a nursing home, that person can stay. All right. So can anyone qualify for Medicaid? No, of course not. This is not an entitlement program. Medicaid is a needs-based program, and it requires you to be financially impoverished. Now, let's be honest about something, okay? If you're actually impoverished, you don't even need to waste any time on this webinar. You can just go to Department of Social Services, and you can get your family member on Medicaid. They're going to help you, and no big deal. It's all done. You don't need a lawyer. You don't need nothing. Just go to Department of Social Services, say, hey, my mom needs Medicaid, and she has no money, no income, no assets, or minimal, as you will see, and then you're good to go. People come to people like attorneys so that we can make it look like you are impoverished, and this is totally legitimate and legal. And you say, Dan, how dare you do that? Well, if I don't do it, the guy next door or down the street's going to be doing it anyway, and you're going to be lining up outside his door. So that's why I do it. It's permissible. A lot of people do it. The problem is you cannot have a lot of money, and here are the resource limits. If you have a sick spouse, they can only have $15,150 in their name. So if my father's passed away and my mother is 82 and she has a stroke, she can only have $15,150 in her name and still qualify for Medicaid. And she can only have $845 per month in income. That includes Social Security. So you say, well, there's no way that that's ever going to happen because my mom gets Social Security. It's $950 a month. Don't worry. Of course, you're working with an attorney. We get around that all the time legitimately. Now, if your parents are still married and one is sick and the other is a well spouse, the well spouse is entitled to approximately $124,000 as well. Well, you say, all right, well, the two of them are entitled to about $135,000. That's not a heck of a lot of money. It's true. And then the well spouse receives $3,090 per month maximum. So here's an example. Let's say my mom earned more of an income and now she's the disabled spouse. She has $3,000 a month between pension and Social Security. And my father, who didn't really do much throughout his life as far as working goes, has $700 of income. He would be entitled, first my mother, up to $845, and then the remaining amount would go to my pops until he has a total of $3,090. So we allow marital income shifting, but not a heck of a lot of money for a lot of New York, as you can see. Now, again, something to remember is that when we're doing Medicaid planning, we like assets. We do not like income. And I try to say this every time I do this talk. We like assets. We don't like income, and here's why. We have complete control over our assets, right? You have cash in the bank right now. Do whatever you want with it. Want to buy Bitcoin? Go right ahead. Trade it for actual physical gold. You can do that too. Assets are completely controllable. We can trade them, and we can also transfer who owns them. Now, Medicaid allows more exceptions and exemptions for assets, and you knew deep down inside people who have more money in the bank are going to get a benefit. Even from a government program like this, they get a benefit. And people say, what? And I say, uh-huh. And you say, no way, that can't be true. And I say, yep. Because people who have high incomes, people who had pensions, they still exist, and Social Security of a decent amount. They are penalized much more. Remember, income you don't have any control over. When you retire, you're going to get Social Security. If you're lucky, you have a small pension. At this point, it's getting really lucky for people on this phone call to have a pension. You may have some required minimum distributions from a retirement plan, but you're typically not really in control of your income, right? So the government's got you because they say, ha, 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 you can't really do that much to control your income. And remember, you can't really leave your income to anybody in particular other than your spouse. So if you and your spouse pass away, guess what happens to the Social Security payment? It just disappears. What happens to the pension payment? It just disappears. It doesn't go to your kids. At least 99.9% of the time it doesn't. So again, Medicaid tends to punish high income earners than people that have large assets. We try to focus as we get closer into retirement to have more income on a monthly basis. The problem is for Medicaid planning, that doesn't work very well. So I'm going to transfer my assets because I'm in control of my assets. I can transfer them. I can't really transfer income. Remember, when I die, it goes to my spouse. When my spouse dies, it's gone. So the assets, we have to get down to those low dollar amounts of $15,150 for the sick spouse. And how do we do that? And what is the look back? Now let's look at the right-hand side first. For the nursing home, so if I have a family member who needs to go to a nursing home and they transferred money to qualify for Medicaid, but it's only been 3 years and 6 months, you get no credit. All the money that was transferred is going to be deducted against that past care. So my mom transfers $300,000 to me. And let's say she's in Nassau County, and Nassau is about $12,000 a month. Medicaid's going to say, ah, ha, 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 you didn't make it the full 5 years. Your mom transferred $300,000. That's the numerator. The denominator is the $12,000 a month. And I'm going to owe approximately 23 months of care, that full $300,000, back to Medicaid. Now I'm going to say, well, I went to Vegas and I lost it on bet on black and I should have bet on red again. And they're going to say, that's fine. Well, you better go back to Vegas and make it back up because they're going to come after me. All right. So keep that in mind. If you are doing Medicaid planning or you're doing it for your parents, you got to make that 5 years. If people are getting close, like 4 years and 2 months, I tell the kid, look, you received $300,000. Pay that extra $120,000 for the next several months. You get to keep $180,000. What a deal. You survived. You made it. The thing is for home care, to qualify, get under that $15,150, I just need to make it for 1 month. That's right. I have too much money in January. I transfer some of my assets, most of them in February. In March, I can put in the application, and then DSS has 3 months to respond. Now, what kind of exemptions are available? Remember how I said these financial exemptions are available. If you didn't have any money, you don't need an attorney. What do clients work with people like me for? Well, I tell them, if you have retirement plan assets, those are exempt for asset purposes. We'll go over that more. Spousal refusal can be used for asset or income exemptions. You can refuse to take care of your spouse. Medicaid promissory notes, if you need to go to a nursing home, we can protect about 40% of the money if you don't make it that full 5-year period. And certain Medicaid trusts, that in and of itself could be its own discussion. If you want to have a discussion specifically about Medicaid trusts, please tell Circle of Care and PSS you would like to have me come back, because we don't have time to do more than just a perfunctory review of them. And then from an income perspective, we can do what are called pooled income trusts. I'm going to touch on all of these things right now. Now try sticking with those allowable exemptions, not your own scheme. And I say this, remember, DSS is smarter than you. It's funny because I'll meet with people who are scammers, and that's fine. You know, you worked hard for your money. You want to keep it. So did your parents. So did everybody. I got it. Well, at least many people. I'm not going down this road of questioning either. But my point is this. I will get people coming in, and they say, well, what if I transfer this first to my child and then into cash, and then the cash goes back to my wife? And I say, well, DSS has an answer for that. You're breaking the laws for Medicaid. Well, what if I decide to, transfer this and not disclose it to Medicaid? Well, they have an answer for that. If you have an idea that's too good to be true, I'm going to transfer this business ownership into some LLC and they're not going to know that I'm an owner, it's not going to work. All right. The first guy who came up with an original idea, they put it in front of DSS. DSS said, good one on you. We're never going to let that happen again. So they've already seen it. The bad news is you don't have any original ideas to how to pull a fast one over on DSS. Someone else beat you there. And if you do happen to be that first guy, be ready, because they can already say, hey, we caught you. They can go back and say, and we're going to penalize you. And remember, when you have someone on Medicaid, you have to recertify every year. This is the big thing that hurts people. They have a family member who leaves them money outright. Well, if I'm on Medicaid, I can only have $15,150. Now my mother dies and leaves me $200,000. Well, I just got kicked off of Medicaid, and I may even have to pay them back. And when I recertify, if I try to hide it, they're going to say, hey, you had $200,000 bucks, and then you all cashed it out. You took it in cash. Where'd this go? And now I'm in trouble. Now, if you own a home, and you'll have to excuse the noise in the background because my office is here in lovely Manhattan, if it's actually a lovely place to be, and we have loud noises all the time. Okay, so we have a homestead exemption. If you own a home, we can protect that home. Now, this is important for a lot of people who are on the phone who still have parents who are in their 80s, because they've probably been going through a decent amount of their assets. They probably do have income, but remember, when they die, the income stops. You don't really get it. So what do they have left? They have the house. Okay. I can qualify for Medicaid and leave that house to my spouse, even though I'm on Medicaid and I go to the nursing home for the next 25 years. My spouse receives that home. There is no lien. Home care. Remember, we have home care and we have nursing home care. If I am getting home care and I stay in my home the rest of my life and I pass away there or in the hospital soon before or after I've left my home, the house is worth less than $828,000. It avoids Medicaid getting a lien against it. So if my spouse is well, the house can be an unlimited amount of money. So if you have a mom and dad, and mom is sick, dad, he'll get the house if she's on Medicaid. If dad then is also sick, but he stays at home, if the house is worth less than $828,000, you're good to go. No Medicaid lien. It's only going to a nursing home. A child caregiver who's lived in the home and provided care as a primary occupation for 2 years, there's an exemption. So if your parents get sick, move in and take care of them for 2 years. People just they'll change their mailing address, but then they keep working at their regular day job. I got news for you. Like I said, if you think you're going to put a fast one on DSS, you got another thing coming. If you own a house with siblings, the idea is that maybe a parent passed it on to you. That receives also a homestead exemption. Medicaid will not place a lien against it. And if you have a disabled child, in fact, if you're on Medicaid and then your child is on Medicaid, you got a lot of different types of exemptions. And again, you'll have to excuse that banging downstairs as well. Okay, so here's retirement plans and Medicaid. And I like that effect. Giselle just came up with that effect. She's my senior admin. She really does a lot of the work on this. I want to give her a shout out. Your IRA, your 401k and your 403b is exempt from Medicaid asset levels. Remember I told you, you work with attorneys, it's because we are coming up with exemptions for you. You have too much money to get on Medicaid. You can't get mom on Medicaid because she has too much money. Well, guess what? She can have $2 million in her IRA. It's more than $15,150, right? Last time I checked it was. She can still qualify for Medicaid because that $200,000 or $2 million or $2 billion IRA is exempted for asset purposes. So fund your retirement plans. Now, here's the thing. With retirement plans, when you turn 70 and a half, under most circumstances, you have to start taking what are called required minimum distributions. But Medicaid says this. You can take out those required minimum distributions. It will count against your income for Medicaid purposes, which we don't like because income gets penalized, but you can still preserve the asset. And that's what we like. Remember, we like assets. So I tell people, fund your retirement plans. You don't have enough money, you know, your kid doesn't really need to, I don't know, go to you fill in the blank, Cancun for spring break. Make them pay for it, whatever. Now, if you're under 70 years old and you try to get on Medicaid, you are below that required minimum distribution level. The IRS has an alternative. It's called separate and equal periodic payments. We'll talk about that another time. This may be the first time you've seen this chart this way, but if not, then please tell me where you found it. I actually had to sit down and crunch out these numbers because the IRS does it in the reverse order. This is the amount of money you have to take out of your IRA based on age. So let's look at 70, 80, and 90 at the top. So at 70 years old, if I have $1 million in my IRA, that year I have to take out $36,500. Well, let's say somehow, by miracle, I still have the exact same amount, exactly $1 million at age 80. And it can be through multiple plans. It's the total amount. I have to take out $53,500 because that's 5.35% of $1 million. Let's say I make it to age 90. Now I have to take out 8.77%. So you see, the older you get, the more you have to take out. And you'll see the curve is a little exponential because between 70 and 71, it's only 0.12% increase. But between like 90 and 91, there it's almost 0.5% in addition. So you see it ratchets up over time. By the way, if anyone wants the slideshow, please feel free to email me at the end of this presentation. I'm glad to offer it, and I'm sure PSS will make it available. Now, spousal refusal. We spoke about spousal refusal. Your spouse may refuse to pay for your care. It's useful if you have too many assets or income, but especially for income, because remember, we're stuck with income. It's a pain in the neck. Now, Department of Social Services can require your spouse to pay 25% of that income over their $3,090 exemption amount over to DSS. And that's happening more frequently now. It used to be, years ago, remember the good old days? Everyone talks about the good old days. Yeah, we state attorneys have that too. You may not find it very entertaining, but we used to be able to get away with a full 100% going to the spouse. Now it's 75% of any amount over $3,090. So the spouse gets $3,090. Then let's say they're getting an additional $4,000 of income. They're only allowed to keep $3,000 of that in addition. And again, Department of Social Services can place a lien against the wealth spouse's assets upon their death if they try to refuse. Again, Medicaid trusts, I would love to spend a whole class speaking about them. We just don't have the time to do it. Very simply stated, trusts have three parties. The creator, who creates the trust, that's going to be the Medicaid recipient. I say you, just again, internalize it. Imagine you're getting on Medicaid, but imagine your parent. Your parent is the creator. The trustee tends to be someone other than the beneficiary. That is you. If you're the Medicaid individual, you are the beneficiary, but the trustee has to be someone else. So let's say you have a parent who's getting on Medicaid. They're going to create a trust. They're going to be the income beneficiary typically, and you are going to be the trustee. Because your parent, who's the beneficiary and the creator, cannot qualify for Medicaid and also be the trustee on their Medicaid trust. Now, a Medicaid trust must be irrevocable. For all your parents who did trusts and they said, my trust is the revocable, Dan Timins Revocable Living Trust. Well, that doesn't qualify for Medicaid. And they say, but I thought trusts qualify for Medicaid. Yes, irrevocable trusts. And not just irrevocable, they have to be Medicaid compliant. So when people say, yeah, I've got this covered, the first thing they do, they come to me, they say, Mom and Dad dealt with this 17 years ago, and here's a copy of the trust. And I look at it and I say, you guys are in a bad position. I hate to be the bearer of bad news. It's because they didn't realize they needed an irrevocable trust. Do not let ignorance be the way that you just figure things are going to work out, because this is not a world where ignorance is going to work for you. All right, the government has very specific rules regarding Medicaid. You have to be impoverished. And if the trust is revocable, you can always say, you know what, I'm putting this money in the trust, but I'm going to revoke it. I'm going to take the money back. Medicaid says, nah. You can't have control over those assets and have the right to take it back. You have to keep the assets out of your name, and you can't be both the trustee, who's in control of the funds, and the beneficiary who receives the benefit. It's an important thing to remember. Income-only trusts, this is where we place assets like the home into the trust. The reason we place the home in the trust is because we don't want to take income out of the house, and we can't. It's protecting the asset. These are called Medicaid asset protection trusts by some people, and think why. Your parent can only take out the income. It's an income-only trust. What does that mean? It's a trust that protects the assets for Medicaid purposes. Medicaid Asset Protection Trust. We're protecting the asset, not the income. So a house is perfect because that's what we want to protect. We want to protect the house. There's no income being generated from a house. So that's the first thing we place into these Medicaid trusts. You still have to make it that 5 years for nursing home purposes. But if you make it that 5 years, you're in the clear. I tell people when they get diagnosed with some type of degenerative illness, hey, I'm really sorry this happened to you. As a side note, while you're, trying to deal with this emotionally, I can tell you this, we can protect that house that you live in, make sure your kids get it, as long as, we plan early in advance. And they do it. It's like 100%. It's the amount of knowledge that people have and desire to maintain their wealth never ceases to amaze me. No matter how sick they are, they tend to want to do it. They can figure it out. When your parent passes away, they get a step up in the cost basis on the house. And you can't kick them out either. They can live there the rest of their lives, which is great. Now, sometimes they're going to have an exemption on their real estate taxes. And that's called a star exemption. They can maintain that with the Medicaid trust, which is a good thing. Next, I'm going to skip supplemental needs trusts really quickly, if only because we don't have much time to go over them. But if you're creating creating a trust for the benefit of another beneficiary, that would be very helpful, because what you can do is you can have that beneficiary receive funds and still stay on Medicaid. So you can leave money to a third-party supplemental needs trust. Keep going. Whoops, sorry. I'm going to skip first-party trust just because of time. A pooled income trust is important because we spoke about pooled income trusts before. If you have excess income, we are leaving that excess income to a trust that is in a pool. So here, imagine this. As opposed to a parent drafting a legal document specifically for themselves, a not-for-profit has created a generalized trust, and everyone throws their excess income into that trust. All right. Now, you still get your excess share of income. So remember how I said you're only allowed $845 a month. Well, between Social Security and my pension and my required minimum distributions, I'm at $2,845 a month. I have $2,000 too much every month. That is a term called the spend down. And I'll circle it over here. Spend down. You have to spend down that amount, or else eventually it goes to Medicaid. Now, here's the benefit. You can leave it to this pooled income trust. And this is what will happen. The not-for-profit that runs the pooled income trust says, all right, Bill, every month you have $2,000 extra. If you send us your legitimate bills, things like rent or mortgage payments, or things like credit card payments, or different types of food expenses, we'll pay it for you. It sounds too good to be true, right? Well, wait, they're paying it and I don't have to give it to the government? That's wonderful. Well, why don't people do this all the time? Well, they do. The downside is this: if there's money left over at the end of it, it goes to the not-for-profit. But you need these things because it's one of the few ways that we can deal with extra income that you have and still qualify for Medicaid. The money can be used for you. You just don't get it when you pass away. And again, I say you, I'm talking family members. I would suggest that you go over this particular page outside of the presentation. I'd love to go over it more. This is just kind of like the quick fact sheet on Medicaid. These are the different types of trusts. The important ones you're going to want to remember are the last two. This is for your parents who have too much income or assets, too much income. They're going to use a pooled trust. Too much assets, they're going to use an income-only trust. Very good. Now, the best locations to apply for Medicaid. I'm talking about New York. And again, if you have family members who live in Florida or Arizona, congratulations to them. Their weather is way better than ours. And maybe even the people's mentality is better than ours for all I know. I don't know. I never lived in Florida or Arizona. I have lived in other states. But what I can say is this. The Big Apple is the platinum standard for Medicaid. There is no better state for the majority of people in the country to live in than in New York. So that's a huge benefit. My old business partner and I, we used to move people up from Florida or Connecticut or Pennsylvania. We move them into New York, and then we qualify for Medicaid that same day. And again, you look at me, oh my God, you're one of these guys who's destroying this system, et cetera, et cetera. If I'm not doing it, someone else is. And believe me, it's the family members who want this. I'm trying to preserve family wealth. This is how we do it. Now, I particularly believe that this is the list of the best 4 counties. Westchester County, wonderful. Nassau, wonderful. Suffolk, wonderful. New York County is pretty good too. All these counties, DSS and HRA, they are very accommodating. Again, you have to be spot on. When you turn in a Medicaid application, you got to have everything. It used to be they just say, we need A, B, and C, and then we're okay. Now they just reject the application. So now what attorneys do, as a matter of fact, is we just make sure that the Medicaid application is good to go 100% before we send it in. So it's important to remember. Now, we're talking about preserving family wealth, right? So what are good investments to have for Medicaid purposes? First of all, any retirement plans like that IRA or 401k, because it protects the asset. Yeah, we're stuck taking required minimum distributions. You saw. When someone's 65 years old, that's only 3.65% of what's in there. And then it still gets to grow. It's still invested in the stock market. The other, 96 point whatever percent is. Yeah, I could figure it out, but let's just continue on. My grade school arithmetic teacher would be so disappointed in me. Primary residence that's owned by a wealth spouse is a good investment, or that's owned by a Medicaid asset protection trust. And then if you have liquid investable assets that have minimal capital gains, things like a stock that you bought and you thought, oh, this is going to be the next big thing, and then it just turned out to be another thing. If it doesn't have much of a capital gain, that is a good thing. So these are good assets and investments to have for you if you are planning on doing Medicaid planning, or your parent. Now, here are the bad ones, and I see a lot of them. The number one worst one is non-qualified annuities. Now, by way of illustration, and if you work for the insurance industry, bear with me here. I used to help sell these products. I used to help design non-qualified annuities. I'm not a hater of these products. But for Medicaid purposes, they're one of the worst things because they have 2 things that hurt. Number one, they generate income. So if, number one, I want to annuitize it, well, I increased my income. That's not good for Medicaid purposes, remember, because income here, we turned an asset into income. We annuitized it. And I owe taxes. And income taxes, no one likes that. So we say, all right, well, we want to qualify for Medicaid immediately. What do? We have this annuity that's worth $100,000. I initially only put $50,000 in, so let's just wipe it out. Well, now you owe $50,000 worth of income taxes, or at least income taxes on $50,000 of gains. Non-qualified annuities are bad, bad, bad news for Medicaid. So if you're doing Medicaid planning and, a family member has some annuities and we're getting in later part of the year, I'll say, take some of that out, a small amount before the end of this year and the rest out at the beginning of next year. They're not good. for Medicaid planning purposes. For income purposes, fine, I got it. You want to live a nice retirement with lots of income, use non-qualified annuities. Your parents probably have some of these because they didn't have IRAs available until the 70s. So your parents probably have some of these. Permanent life insurance with large cash value, no good. Medicaid, you can only have $1,500 of cash value. Now, you could have a death benefit of $2 million. So when I die, that policy can pay out $2 million. That's cool. The downside is the policy can never have more than $1,500 of cash in the policy. And a $2 million life insurance policy needs more than $1,500 of cash. That's the whole idea. That's how they get you. Converting an IRA to a Roth IRA, no good. You still have to take required minimum distributions for Medicaid purposes out of a Roth IRA. And you'll say, hey, I don't have to take required minimum distributions out of a Roth. You're right, you don't. Unless you want to qualify for Medicaid. And if you want to qualify for Medicaid, you have to take it out. Now, granted, at the same time, you say, well, all right, I'm not getting taxed on it. True, that is correct. But you pay taxes on it when you converted it. So that's no good. You don't want to do Roth conversions if you're planning on getting on Medicaid anytime soon. Anytime you turn an asset like an annuity into income, you annuitize it. No good. No, 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 no. Don't do that. And having multiple homes, you're only allowed to have a primary residence. I can't have 7 residences with my spouse qualify for Medicaid and keep all 7 residences. It doesn't work like that. In fact, I can't have 2. Now, what are the basic documents we need to talk about? They are the power of attorney, the healthcare proxy, and the living will. I'll explain each of these. The power of attorney is a financial document. It's a legal document naming another person who can make financial decisions for you. It can include the ability for that person, your power of attorney, also known as your attorney in fact or agent, to make gifts of your money to other people. And it's while you're alive. Now remember, the term attorney in fact doesn't mean they're an attorney. I'm an attorney, all right? An attorney is just someone's representative. It just happens to be that we associate it with an attorney of law. But your attorney, in fact, does not need to be a lawyer. It's typically your family member or your best friend or someone that you really trust. Now, the power of attorney has its own state form. Here in New York, we have New York statutory form. It's the only one in the state. New Jersey has their form. Connecticut, Arizona has their form. So this is fine. A New York power of attorney, if it's properly executed in New York, is valid in all the states of the Union under the full faith and credit clause of the Constitution. So that's good. Now, some financial companies, I always say okay, Chase Manhattan Bank or JP Morgan Chase, because I work with them. They have the Chase power of attorney. That's cool at any Chase branch in any part of the country. But Bank of America doesn't have to accept that power of attorney, because that's institutional only. They have to accept the state form. So I tell people, do the state form. Having the form solely for your financial institution is not enough. You need to have the state form. And remember, your attorney, in fact, does this. They pay your bills. They can write checks. They can transfer money. They can change your investments from your trusty, preferred stock to, like I love Bitcoin or Litecoin, some other cryptocurrency. They could buy or sell your stuff. They could buy you a bed, and they could sell the armoire that they always hated. It's yours, but they're your power of attorney. You're giving them the ability to do it. Now, if you have the mental capacity, you can always cancel a power of attorney. But once you lose capacity, it gets locked in typically. They can file your income taxes, and they can bring lawsuits. Now, the positive thing is that you may allow gifting to qualify for Medicaid purposes. So if your mom or dad says, hey, I know I'm getting older, I don't mind if you preserve family wealth. Here, I'm making you, daughter, my power of attorney. And I'm going to allow you to have the ability to gift. Well, guess what? Now that daughter has the ability to come to me and say, hey, let's get mom or dad on Medicaid. I'm the power of attorney. I can gift that excess money to me. Mom can only have $15,150. What happens to the other $200,000? They say, you have the power of attorney? They say, yes. I say, well, let's begin gifting it. We're ready to go. The negative is this. Well, now you've just given someone the ability to gift your money. Now that you may be okay with a child doing this, but again, kind of like a niece or nephew, you may not want to do it. So if you have a parent, they may want to name you as the power of attorney and give you the ability to gift. But if you have an aunt or uncle and they say, you can wait till I passed away, you should understand why they're doing that. That's not unusual. Now, when you die, the power of attorney is canceled. It's no longer in effect. At that point, we look at the will. People have powers of attorney. I've had them say, hey, I'm going to use this after the client dies. That's fine. Good luck. No one's going to let you use it. All right, well, I'll use it to create a will then while my aging family member, who I'm the power of attorney over, is still alive. Nope, you can't do that. They had to do it while they were compos mentis. Really quickly, if you have an aging family member and you're their power of attorney, bring them to the financial institution. Please have the bank validate that power of attorney while they are alive. Only appoint someone you trust as the power of attorney. You're more or less giving them a blank check. You know, you're basically saying, hey, I trust you to do the right thing, so do the right thing. Sometimes happens, sometimes doesn't. If you don't trust them, don't name them. They're in charge of your money if you're unable to make financial decisions. Then there's a healthcare proxy. This is the document that says, I can't make my healthcare decisions anymore. Please make them for me if I'm unable. I give you access to my protected HIPAA information regarding my healthcare. Here are my limitations on care. I don't want animal parts to be used in my body because I have some, personal, religious, or some type of altruistic conviction for the sake of animals that I don't want animal organs to be used in me or parts of animal organs, for example. It also includes limitations or permissiveness on organ donations. And it also allows your agent to discontinue life support if you don't want to live in a vegetative state. Now, it may only be needed for a few hours, like I'm going in for a surgery, or it might be needed for the rest of your life. If your grandmother is talking to your grandfather who's been deceased for 7 years and she's in a nursing home and she doesn't understand what's going on, she's never going to make a healthcare decision the rest of her life. Yeah, the healthcare proxy is important for her. But for most of the people on this phone call, you'll need a healthcare proxy because someone's going to need to make a routine decision regarding your healthcare during some elective operation. Last but not least is the living will. This is the document that says, I do not want to live in a vegetative state. Please pull the plug if I'm either in a terminal condition or permanently unconscious. That's what a living will is. It is not naming anyone. The power of attorney names someone to handle your financial decisions. The living will, healthcare proxy for your healthcare decisions. The living will doesn't name anybody. It just says, this is my thoughts and feelings on this. Please don't allow me to live in this condition. These are specifically the things that people say. I don't want to have tube feeding. People say, wait, I do want antibiotics. Remember, you're in a vegetative state. You probably want to go. That's probably what's going to end your life, some type of sepsis or something else. So you say, if I'm in a vegetative state, I don't want antibiotics. That's why that's in there. Need a power of an attorney or a healthcare proxy, or actually both. Because if you can make a healthcare and financial decision, you're fine. The court leaves you alone. If you cannot, and you've named your people of choice in a healthcare proxy and power of attorney, the state's going to leave you alone. But if you're unable to make your own healthcare or financial decision and you have not named anybody, the state is going to hold what is called a guardianship in New York. In some states, it's called a conservatorship. You're going to have to pay for a bunch of attorneys to examine you, as well as doctors, social workers, etc. A few tens of thousands of dollars later, you're going to have a guardian named, whether you wanted that person or not. You had the chance to draft a power of attorney or healthcare proxy, but you chose not to. So the state says, we'll do this for you. And that's the problem with guardianships. The problem is the next of kin tends to be the guardian who is named, whether you want them to or not. There's ongoing reporting requirement, et cetera, et cetera. Guardianships are intrusive and they're often humiliating because you have to be interviewed and you sometimes don't know what's going on. How can my family begin planning? You can create legal documents now. So if you have a family member who's older, or yourselves for that matter, who don't have a power of attorney or healthcare proxy, do me a favor, go out and do that. Doesn't need to be with me, it can be anybody. But get that power of attorney and healthcare proxy. We're all adults here in the room. We all have something to lose. Not just financially, by the way, but just our healthcare decisions. For elderly family members or aging family members or people who are sick, consider creating Medicaid trusts and funding them, changing the deed to the real estate to the trust and the investment account assets. Change the owners on deeds. Avoid converting your assets into guaranteed income. Think twice if you plan on doing Medicaid planning. Like I said, avoid Roth conversions and review capital gains on family investments, because when a family member passes away, you get a step up in that stock's basis. So if you have IBM stock at $10 a share and mom and dad, you're trying to think of the right assets to move. If mom and dad pass away, it's going to step up to today's value of $100 per share. No capital gains. But if you move it to you, you're going to have their capital gains built into it. be warned. That all was a mouthful. I wish that I had left more time for questions, but I am available to speak to you. You can also email me. Here's my email address. You can see it right there. I will email you this slideshow if you have any problems. If there are any questions that I can answer right now, that would be wonderful. I would be more than willing to answer those. That stands for Managed Long-Term Care Program. That's going to be for home care. So when you are attempting to get Medicaid home care, they're going to ask you to choose what managed long-term care program you want. The state has several choices, and they actually outline them perhaps even better than I can on the state's websites. So take a look. The plans do differ. And you can also, if you have an aging family member who has any issues, work with one of those people that I told you about, a geriatric care manager, who will help you determine the best program that they feel your family member can qualify for. No problem. Thank you, Shane, and thank you everyone for listening. Feel free to reach out, and I will email you whatever you would like on this. You can also look at my website. There are also other materials there as well, and thank you, PSS, and you.